This is Communication John. I'm a marriage counselor and I answer your voicemails.
Hi, John. I cheated on my wife about 5 years ago, and I feel like she's just never going to get over it. I've said sorry a million times, but I got to say, like, at a certain point, I just don't know if I can be in a relationship with someone who's this mad at me all the time. How I deal with it.
Okay, 5 years is a long time to get over an affair. And it tells me a couple things. Tells me that one, the processing of the resentment that happened as a result of the betrayal probably was never done effectively. So there's lots of different ways to go through that process. Let me just break down what's needed. I mean, the key thing, it all comes down to one key thing, which is empathy. Empathy is the biggest part. So a lot of men or women who cheat are great about saying sorry, and they're great about expressing remorse, and they want to move past it quickly because they want to get back to having a good relationship. And they might even put themselves in a penalty box, which if you are sticking it out for 5 years and she still hasn't forgiven you, no doubt about it, you're in the penalty box and you're letting yourself stay there. And that's not a healthy place to stay. You kind of are the villain in your own story at this point, and you're not going to really tolerate it much longer. So you need to change the dynamic. So let's talk about empathy for a sec. In order to express and show and resonate that you have empathy, what you have to do is you have to sit her down and say, talk me through what was going through your mind when you found out about the affair. Tell me what you were feeling. I really want to understand. Use those words, right? This is Communication John for a reason. I want to give you words to use. Use those words. Just rewind the video, write it down, right? Take notes, or if you're listening on the podcast, just take notes and say it word for word if you need to. And then your job is to listen. And if it helps, you might even try listening as if that was a different person. Because 5 years ago, you were a different person. And I'm hoping that you grew since then and you wouldn't make the same mistakes. So if it helps to think of it as a different version of yourself, like, you know, you're not going to apologize for something you did when you were 5 or 6 or even 10 years old. Right. So because it's distant, not because you don't regret it, you might regret doing something bad at 10 years old. But if you're still kind of feeling like you owe someone an apology right now for something you did back then, it's a little weird. So it's helpful to separate yourself. That way you can be there for her. You can be present for her as she talks about the emotional reality she's still experiencing. Because right now what's happening is she's holding on to that resentment as a means of self-defense. She's trying to remind herself, don't get too close. He might do it again. But if you sit there and you show her, oh my God, I didn't realize you felt that. That's what was going through your mind. That must have been horrible. You must have felt so lonely, confused. Oh, I can't believe I did all that to you. That's horrible. If you can have that kind of attitude, you repeat back to her what she felt and she sees that you understand, that is an insurance policy that you won't do it again because now you've experienced the pain on a lesser degree. So that's the way to do it. You have to process the pain. There are lots of books that can walk you through this. Imago is generally a very good one. Harville Hendricks and Helen Hunt have a book. I think it's called Keeping the Love You Find or Getting the Love You Want. It's a good book. My wife, Michelle, and I wrote a book. I'm not trying to plug it, but there's one called Your Apology Sucks. It's on Amazon, got great reviews, kind of a bestseller. That walks through the process specifically of apologizing. That's probably what's going on. Now, it could be also there's remnant stuff from her childhood. If that's the case, you're going to have a hard time without a therapist. And I think it's probably something that's a little outside of the scope of someone like a pastor. I know a lot of people like going to their pastors if they're religious. You want someone who has experience with helping people let go of trauma. She might even need EMDR therapy in order to let go of kind of past things if for some reason you feel like you've gone through this process and you just can't let go. And if you're not strong enough to sit there and have her go through it, then do that in the context of a counseling session, whether it's me or someone else. I don't care. But you should have some guardrails up if it's too hard for you to do on your own. If you want to leave a voicemail, it's 888-705-3830. Again, 888-705-3830. I do these at least a couple times a week, sometimes even more, and happy to help answer any of your questions. Let's go to the next one.
Hey, John. I love my wife, but I feel like I'm married to not just her, but to her mom also. Every time, and I mean every single time we argue, or anything personal happens, her mom knows about it within about 10 seconds. She'll bring up things I haven't even processed yet, and I'm standing there looking at her mother-in-law trying to enjoy dinner, and she brings up something where I don't even know how I feel about it yet because it happened so recently, and there's just no privacy. I've tried to bring it up with my wife, but she just says she's always confided in her mom and doesn't see the big deal. And I feel like the boundary's not being respected, and I don't know what to do.
Well, you have to basically make her respect the boundary. That's what boundaries are. So you have to say, listen, this is a big problem for me. This is not a relationship that I agreed to be in. I agreed to be in a relationship with you, not you and your mother. And if you guys are a package deal and your mom gets to know every little nook and cranny of my life, I'm uncomfortable. Now, I'm not threatening to walk away necessarily, but I'm not happy. This is very difficult for me, and I'd like to know what you can do to make this simpler. If your answer is get over it, I'm going to tell my mom everything, then this relationship long-term won't work out. I'll try to cope with it, but I'm telling you right now, over time, I will just resent you too much for it to be the same relationship in 2-3 years down the line that it is today. Because now I'm still trying to be open-minded and try and work things out. If I were to develop my own relationship with your mother somehow, maybe that would be a different story, but that's not in the cards at the moment. I already feel a little weird that she knows as much about me as she does. And then you wait, you keep your mouth shut and you wait and see what your wife says. Because what she says will dictate how you go from there. But boundaries are important. If your boundary is you are not allowed to tell your mom things that happen in our marriage when they're embarrassing to me, right? You could say like, hey, we've got in a fight. You could talk generalities because that's her life. She's allowed to talk about that. But if she's going to share specific details and it's uncomfortable for you, that's breaking a boundary. And the only way to enforce a boundary when you're an adult is to take yourself out of the relationship. Sometimes you take yourself out permanently, and that's a divorce or a separation or a breakup. Sometimes you take yourself out for 5 minutes and you cool off and you take a little walk around the house just to get a breather, right? And everything in between, everything from 5 minutes to forever is acceptable, depending on what exactly, what boundary was crossed and how you want to implement that kind of, not punishment, but kind of repercussion of what happens when a boundary is crossed. So you need to figure out how to take yourself out, but you have to communicate it. You can't stonewall and say, oh, you talked to your mom, I'm not talking to you for 2 days, right? That's punishment. That's torture. That gets a little toxic and unhealthy. You have to say, listen, my feelings are hurt. I'm going to need space. I'm going to try and come back to you, but this is not working for me. And you need to figure out if this is a deal breaker for you or not, because it's starting to be a deal breaker for me. You have to be able to talk with that amount of confidence and know that she might say, this is just the way it is. And I'm going to talk to my mom about everything. And you have to be willing to walk away at a certain point. That's what boundaries are. I hope that was helpful. I'm going to give it to you straight, right? Because it's not always the answer you want, but hopefully it's the one you need. If you want to leave a voicemail for me, for Dr. John DeBach, that's me, Communication John. It's 888-705-3830, 888-705-3830. Talk to you guys next time.